I never imagined that my own daughter, the little girl I raised with so much love for 40 years, would look me in the eye and scream, "You should be dead," in front of 50 guests at her own birthday party. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Edward Miller. I'm 65 years old, and this is the most painful, but also the most liberating story of my life. For decades, I was a successful entrepreneur in the apparel industry in Chicago, building a net worth of $950,000 by working 16-hour days. My wife, Isabel, passed away from cancer 5 years ago. And since then, my 2 children, Christine and James, became the most important thing in my world. Christine was always my princess, a brilliant architect, 42 years old, with a smile that could light up any room. For years, we were inseparable. Every Sunday, we'd have lunch together. She would tell me about her projects, her dreams, her worries. I would advise her, support her financially when she needed it. And she gave me that sense of purpose every widowed father needs. Everything changed in October 2018 when she met Alan Reed, a 45-year-old well-dressed lawyer with the smooth-talking charm of a man who knows how to manipulate people. At first I liked him. He was polite to me, seemed to genuinely love Christine, and she was glowing with happiness. They married in an intimate ceremony in May 2019, where I proudly walked her down the aisle. But something strange started to happen after the wedding. Christine began to pull away. The Sunday lunches became less frequent, first every 2 weeks, then once a month. Her answers on the phone became clipped, as if talking to me was an annoying chore. Whenever I tried to visit, she always had an excuse. Dad, we're busy. Another day would be better. Alan's working from home. My son, James, a 36-year-old doctor, also noticed the change. Dad, something's off with Christine, he told me in February 2023 during one of our monthly dinners. Patricia and I went to their house last week, and Alan was very cold to us. Christine seemed nervous, like there was tension in the air. The moment that changed everything came in September 2023. Christine would be turning 43 on the 20th, and she invited me to her party in a way that felt strange. Dad, I want you to come to my birthday. It's going to be something special, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I've invited a lot of important people. Alan says it's important that you're there. That last sentence bothered me. Why would Alan have an opinion on my presence at my own daughter's birthday? The day of the party, I arrived at Christine's house in Lincoln Park at 8 p.m. It was an elegant home, one I had helped finance as a wedding gift. The backyard was decorated with golden lights, and tables were set for about 50 people. I recognized some of the guests, Christine's colleagues, old college friends, neighbors from the exclusive area where they lived. From the moment I walked in, something felt off. Christine greeted me with a cold kiss on the cheek, not her usual warm hug. Hi, Dad, so glad you could make it, she said with a mechanical smile. Alan immediately appeared by her side, shaking my hand a little too tightly. Edward, welcome. Christine was anxious for you to be here. The way he said it unsettled me. Not we were anxious, but Christine was anxious, as if he were just an observer of my daughter's wishes. But I decided to ignore it and made my way toward a group of guests. That's when I started noticing the strange looks. Conversations that stopped abruptly when I approached. Quiet whispers that ceased as soon as they saw me. A woman I didn't know in her 50s was watching me with a mix of curiosity and pity that I found baffling. I walked over to a table where Christine's old college friends were gathered. "Edward, long time no see," exclaimed Martha Jones, an architect I'd known since she and Christine were in school together. But her initial enthusiasm quickly faded, replaced by a palpable discomfort. How are you doing? Christine was telling us that you've been having some health issues." My blood ran cold. Health issues? I felt perfectly fine. I had a full physical just a month ago, and all the results were excellent. "I don't know what you're talking about, Martha." "I feel great," I replied, trying to stay calm. The confusion on her face was obvious. She exchanged a nervous glance with the others at the table before quickly changing the subject. "Oh, that's great. It must have been a misunderstanding." Over the next hour, similar situations happened again and again. Guests spoke to me with that condescending tone people use for older folks who supposedly have cognitive problems. Simple questions asked with exaggerated slowness, as if I needed extra time to process the information. Forced smiles accompanied by poorly disguised expressions of pity. The last straw came when I was heading to the restroom and overheard snippets of a conversation between two women I couldn't identify. Poor thing. Christine says he hasn't been the same since Isabel died. They say sometimes he can't even remember where he put his keys. It must be so hard for her to deal with this. I returned to the backyard with a mix of confusion and growing anger. What were they talking about? What had Christine been telling them about me? I searched for my daughter and found her in the center of the yard, surrounded by a group of friends, laughing cheerfully. When our eyes met, her expression changed instantly. The joy vanished from her face, replaced by something I couldn't identify at the time, but which I now recognize as guilt mixed with resentment. Alan appeared at my side again, placing his hand on my shoulder possessively. "Edward, come with me. There are some people I want you to meet." He led me to a group of older men who were talking near the pool. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Christine's father, Edward Miller." One of them, a bald man about my age, extended his hand. "A pleasure, Edward. I'm Dr. Franklin Reed, a geriatric specialist. Alan has told me a lot about you." The way he said those words, with a mix of familiarity and professionalism, immediately put me on guard. The conversation with Dr. Reed left me deeply disturbed. For the next 20 minutes, this supposed geriatric specialist bombarded me with questions that were seemingly casual, but clearly targeted. "How have you been sleeping lately, Edward? Noticed any changes in your memory? Do you find it hard to concentrate on tasks you used to do easily?" I answered each question firmly, making it clear that my mental and physical health was perfectly intact. But Dr. Reed's persistence and the way Alan watched our conversation with obvious interest made me profoundly uncomfortable. It was as if they were waiting for me to confirm some kind of decline that simply didn't exist. The situation reached its climax when Christine walked to the center of the yard to begin the traditional toast. The 50 guests gathered around her, champagne glasses in hand, as my daughter took the microphone they had set up. "Dear friends," she began with a clear, smiling voice, "thank you for joining me on this special day. 43 years of life surrounded by the love of wonderful people." Her eyes scanned the crowd until they met mine. For a second, I saw a flash of the little girl she used to be, but it vanished instantly. I especially want to thank my husband, Alan, for organizing this perfect celebration. Applause filled the yard Alan walked over to Christine and hugged her possessively, whispering something in her ear that made her nod. Then my daughter continued. I also want to talk about the importance of family, but the family that truly supports you, that understands you, that doesn't become a burden when you most need to move on with your life. An uncomfortable silence fell over the guests. Some people exchanged nervous glances. I felt as if the air in the yard had thickened, charged with an electric tension that everyone could feel. Christine went on, her voice taking on a harder edge. Sometimes older people don't understand that times have changed, that they can't make decisions for us anymore, that they have to accept when it's time to step aside and let the new generation take control. The venom in her words was unmistakable. She was talking directly about me, in front of all these guests who had already been primed to see me as a senile old man who didn't know when to retire. The humiliation was like a public slap in the face, but I decided to keep my composure. However, what came next crossed every line of respect and decency. Christine looked directly at me, and with a coldness I had never seen in her eyes, she raised her voice to make sure every person in the yard could hear her clearly. Some people just don't know when it's their time to go, she declared with a cruel smile. People who cling to a life that no longer belongs to them, who don't understand that their time passed years ago. She paused dramatically, savoring the moment. Sometimes I think it would be so much easier for everyone if certain people would just disappear. The yard fell into absolute silence. I could see shocked faces among the guests, some looking at the ground in obvious discomfort. Then, Christine delivered the final blow. She pointed her finger directly at me and screamed, in a voice filled with a hatred that echoed across the yard, "You should be dead!" The words landed like bombs in the silence. Some women gasped in shock. Several men shifted uncomfortably. Alan tried to approach Christine to calm her down, but she pushed him away with a sharp gesture, keeping her gaze locked on me with terrifying intensity. In that moment, something inside me broke for good. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the way she had said them, the obvious premeditation, the calculated cruelty. This wasn't a momentary emotional outburst. It was the result of months, maybe years of pent-up resentment and outside manipulation. But instead of collapsing or shouting back, something unexpected happened inside me. A strange calm washed over me. I smiled. Not a bitter or sarcastic smile, but a genuine, almost liberating one. I slowly reached my right hand into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out a folded document I always kept with me. The guests watched with growing curiosity as I unfolded the paper, holding it up for everyone to see. It was my will, the document that named Christine as my sole heir, the beneficiary of all my assets valued at $950,000. Without saying a word, I began to methodically tear the will, piece by piece, letting the fragments drift slowly to the ground. The sound of the ripping paper was the only thing audible in the dead silence that had fallen. Christine's face changed dramatically. The arrogance and hatred were instantly replaced by pure panic. Her eyes widened as she understood what she was witnessing. The color drained from her face, and tears of desperation began to well up. As the last pieces of the will fluttered to the ground like withered leaves, I maintained that calm smile that seemed to further bewilder everyone present. The silence was so thick, you could hear the wind rustling through the trees, Christine stared at me with a mixture of terror and desperation I had never seen in her eyes. "My dear daughter," I began, my voice serene, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos she had just unleashed. "You've just gotten exactly what you wished for. You'll never have to depend on me for money again." Murmurs began to spread through the guests like ripples in a pond. Some people discreetly pulled out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary that needed to be documented. Alan tried to intervene, stepping toward me with his hands out in a placating gesture. "Edward, please don't do this. Christine is going through a difficult time. She didn't mean that. Emotions sometimes get the best of us." I stopped him with a look that must have conveyed all the determination I had built up over months of suspicion and now certainty. "Oh, but I think she meant exactly that, Alan. And I have reason to believe you had a lot to do with those words." The lawyer's face changed instantly. The mask of family concern fell away, revealing a look of genuine alarm. "I don't know what you're talking about, Edward. Maybe you should calm down a bit." "Calm down?" I repeated, letting a note of amusement color my voice. "On the contrary, I've never been calmer in my life. In fact, I'm so calm that I can finally think clearly about a lot of things that have been happening lately." I took my smartphone out of my pocket and held it up so everyone could see. "You know what's really interesting about modern phones? They can record conversations with exceptional sound quality. My son James, who's a doctor as you all know, helped me set up a very useful app." The transformation on Christine and Alan's faces was instant and revealing. Panic replaced any pretense of innocence. Alan took a step back as if my phone were a venomous snake. "Since January of this year," I continued, addressing both them and the guests who now surrounded us with rapt fascination, "I've been recording some very enlightening conversations. 15 recordings in total, to be exact. Conversations where very specific plans about my future are discussed." Christine finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whimper. "Dad, no, it's not what you think." "Oh, it's not?" I interrupted her gently. "So it's not true that since February you've been telling all our acquaintances that I have memory problems, that I can't remember where I put my keys, that my judgment is deteriorating?" Tears were now streaming freely down my daughter's cheeks, but they were no longer tears of sadness, but of absolute panic. Alan tried to approach again, but this time several guests instinctively stepped in his way, forming a protective barrier around me. "And you, Alan," I continued, turning to my son-in-law, "isn't it true that you've been looking for doctors willing to certify my mental incompetence? Dr. Franklin Reed here, for example, who curiously shows up at my daughter's party without me ever having met him before." All eyes turned to the geriatric specialist, who had gone pale and seemed to be desperately looking for a discreet exit. His presence, which had seemed like a coincidence before, now took on a completely sinister meaning. "How much did Alan pay you, doctor?" I asked directly. "Because I have bank statements showing a transfer of $500 from my son-in-law's account to yours last July, just 1 week after our first casual meeting at the country club." Dr. Reed began backing towards the exit, muttering incomprehensible excuses. Several guests followed him with looks of disgust and contempt. Martha Jones, the architect who had shown such strange pity at the beginning of the evening, approached me with a look of deep concern. "Edward, are you saying that Christine and Alan have been lying about your mental health?" "Not just lying, Martha. They've been orchestrating an elaborate plan to have me declared legally incompetent The goal was simple: to gain control of my $950,000 in property and savings. A murmur of outrage swept through the group. Several people began to look at Christine and Alan, with expressions ranging from disappointment to open disgust. "Dad, please," Christine begged, stepping forward with her hands outstretched. "We can fix this. We can talk." "The time for talking ended the moment you screamed that I should be dead," I replied with a firmness that surprised even me. "But there's something else you all need to know. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp, I have an appointment at the Lincoln Park Police Precinct with Detective Carl Mendoza." The mention of Detective Mendoza acted like a bomb in the already tense atmosphere. Alan, who until that moment had tried to maintain some control, completely lost his composure. His face contorted into a grimace of desperation and fury that revealed his true nature. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, addressing both me and the guests who were watching with growing horror. "This crazy old man is making up stories because he can't accept that he doesn't control our lives anymore." The reaction from the guests was immediate. Several men instinctively stood taller, forming a protective semicircle around me. Alan's verbal aggression had crossed a line that even the most neutral guests couldn't tolerate. "Watch how you talk to him, son," intervened Anthony Vegas, a 72-year-old retired businessman who had been a client of mine for decades. His voice carried an authority that made Alan flinch. "Edward Miller is one of the most honorable men I know. If he says he has proof, he has it." Christine tried a different tactic. She approached me, tears streaming down her cheeks, adopting the vulnerable little girl act she used to use when she was young to get what she wanted. "Dad, please don't go to the police. We're family. We can solve this between us. Alan is stressed from work. I've been confused, but I love you. I've always loved you." Her performance might have been convincing to someone who hadn't heard the recordings stored on my phone, but I knew the truth. I had heard her voice coldly discussing the details of my future confinement in a nursing home, calculating how long it would take them to sell my house in Lakeview. "You love me, Christine?" I asked with a genuine sadness that cut through my determination like a sword. "Did you love your father when you told Alan, and I quote, 'Once he's committed, we'll have full access to his bank accounts'?" The color completely drained from my daughter's face. Her tears intensified, but now they were tears of pure panic. The guests exchanged looks of disgust and surprise. Some women began to instinctively move away from Christine, as if her betrayal were contagious. It was at that moment that Alan made the mistake that would seal his fate. Desperation and the fear of legal consequences drove him to a completely irrational act. "That's enough," he roared, striding toward me with clenched fists. "I'm not going to let you ruin our future with your senile selfishness." He lunged at me with a violence that caught everyone off guard. Although several men tried to intercept him, he managed to reach me and land a punch squarely on my face, sending me stumbling backward. The pain was intense, but what shocked me more was the final confirmation of who this man who had won over my daughter really was. He wasn't just a con artist. He was someone willing to use physical violence against a 65-year-old man to protect his criminal plans. The guest's reaction was immediate and decisive. Anthony Vegas and 3 other men tackled Alan, wrestling him to the ground amidst shouts of outrage. The women backed away screaming, some immediately pulling out their phones to record the scene or call 911. "Let me go! Let me go, you idiots!" Alan yelled, struggling uselessly against the arms holding him down. His elegant suit was torn, his perfect hair was a mess, and his mask of respectability had completely fallen away. Christine ran toward him, but not to help me, to try and free her husband. "Leave him alone! You don't know what you've done!" That reaction was the final blow to any shred of fatherly love that might have been left in my heart. In the moment she should have been worried about my well-being after I'd been punched, she chose to defend the man who had assaulted me. James came running from inside the house, where he had been talking with Patricia in the kitchen. Seeing my swollen face and the chaos in the yard, his expression hardened in a way I had rarely seen in my younger son. "What the hell happened here?" he demanded, immediately coming over to examine my injury with a doctor's professional eye. "Your brother-in-law just showed his true colors," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "And your sister just definitively chose her side." Several guests had already called the police. Sirens could be heard in the distance, rapidly approaching the neighborhood. Alan, realizing the gravity of his situation, intensified his escape attempts, but the men holding him didn't give an inch. "Edward," Martha Jones said, approaching with a makeshift compress for my face. "We all saw what happened. We will all be witnesses that he assaulted you without provocation." I looked around the yard, at the faces of the 50 people who had come to celebrate my daughter's birthday. Many had their phones out, recording every second of the violence and the revelations. The evidence would be overwhelming. "Thank you," I murmured, accepting the compress. "But I think I have enough witnesses for a lifetime." The red and blue lights of the patrol cars began to flash against the house's windows, and I knew the nightmare was finally coming to an end. The police officers entered the yard with efficient professionalism, quickly assessing the chaotic scene before them. Sergeant Lopez, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, went directly to where Alan was still being held down by the guests. "Gentlemen, you can let him go," he ordered with authority. "We'll take it from here." As the officers handcuffed Alan, who alternated between incoherent legal threats and desperate pleas, I took the opportunity to explain the full situation to Sergeant Lopez. I showed him my phone with the recordings, mentioned the scheduled appointment with Detective Mendoza, and pointed to the multiple witnesses who had seen the assault. "Mr. Miller," the sergeant said after hearing my initial account, "we'll need you to come to the station early tomorrow to file a full report. For now, we're arresting Mr. Reed for assault, but we'll need all the documentation you mentioned to proceed with the other charges." Christine, who had been silent during the police intervention, finally found her voice. "This is insane. My husband is not a criminal. My father is confused. He doesn't know what he's doing." Officer Martinez, a young but determined woman, turned to Christine with a stern expression. "Ma'am, multiple witnesses confirm that your husband physically assaulted your father without provocation. Furthermore, the fraud allegations are very serious and will be thoroughly investigated." "But it's my money too," Christine yelled, with a desperation that revealed her true mindset. "I'm his daughter. I have a right to that inheritance." A murmur of disapproval went through the group of guests. Even those who didn't know all the details could sense the mercenary nature of her words. James approached Christine with a look of profound pain. "A right? A right to what, sis? To have our father declared incompetent? To steal everything he worked for 40 years? "You don't get it," Christine shot back. "You have your career, your practice. Your future is secure. I need that money. Alan has debts. We have expenses. We have plans." The brutal honesty of her confession left everyone stunned. There were no more pretenses of filial love or concern for my well-being. It was only about the money, just as I had suspected for months. As the officers proceeded with Alan's formal arrest, I explained to the remaining guests how I had gradually uncovered the plot against me. It started in January 2023, when I noticed the first strange changes in Christine's behavior. At first, I thought it was normal marital problems, I explained as Officer Martinez took notes. But when she started insisting I sign simple documents to update my legal affairs, my gut told me something was wrong. The turning point had come in March, during a routine visit to my house. I found medical papers on my desk that I didn't remember authorizing. They were preliminary psychiatric evaluations, all suggesting early signs of cognitive decline. The problem was, I had never visited any of the doctors whose names appeared on the reports. That's when I decided to involve James, I continued, looking at my younger son with gratitude. As a doctor, he could explain exactly what they were trying to do and how I could protect myself. James nodded gravely. I installed a recording app on his phone and taught him how to use it discreetly. I also went with him to get full medical exams with trusted specialists to document his perfect mental health. Over the next few months, I had systematically gathered evidence. The most incriminating recordings were obtained by faking mild episodes of confusion, which encouraged Christine and Alan to openly discuss their plans in my presence, believing I wouldn't understand or remember. The clearest recording I got was in July, I revealed, taking out my phone again. Christine is telling Alan, "Once we have the declaration of incompetence, we can sell the Lakeview house immediately. With that $500,000 plus his savings, we'll have enough to pay off your debts and start over." The looks of horror among the guests were plain to see. Several women put their hands to their mouths. Others shook their heads in disgust. Anthony Vegas swore under his breath, expressing what many were thinking. Officer Martinez finished taking preliminary statements from several key witnesses. Martha Jones, Anthony Vegas, and 6 other guests provided detailed testimony of everything they had witnessed that evening. "Mr. Miller," the officer said before leaving, "Mr. Reed will be held until his preliminary hearing. As for your daughter, we'll need you to formally present the recordings and all documentation tomorrow to determine if additional criminal charges are warranted." Christine, hearing this, collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. But these were no longer tears of genuine remorse. They were tears of self-pity from someone who had lost a very high-stakes gamble. "Dad," she mumbled through her sobs, "please don't do this. We can find another solution. Alan can get help. He can pay off the debts another way." I looked at her one last time with something that once resembled fatherly love. "Christine, you had 42 years to choose to be an honorable daughter. Tonight, you chose to be a con artist. That decision has consequences." As the patrol cars drove away with Alan, the guests began to slowly disperse. Many came over to shake my hand, express their support, and offer help if I needed it. The solidarity from these people, who just hours before had treated me like a senile old man, moved me deeply. The party was over, but my true liberation was just beginning. The next morning came with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in months. I woke up early at 6:30 and spent time meticulously organizing all the documentation I would present to Detective Mendoza. On my office desk, I laid out the 15 transcribed recordings, the fraudulent medical reports, the bank statements showing suspicious payments, and the legitimate psychiatric evaluations confirming my full mental capacity. James arrived at 8 to accompany me to the station. My face still showed the swelling from Alan's punch, a physical reminder of the lengths they were willing to go to silence me. "How are you feeling, Dad?" he asked as we reviewed the documents together. "Free," I answered without hesitation. For the first time in over a year, I feel completely free. The Lincoln Park precinct was bustling with morning activity when we arrived. Detective Carl Mendoza received us in his office, a man in his 50s with a serious but understanding expression. He had reviewed the preliminary report from the previous night and already had a basic grasp of the situation. "Mr. Miller," he began, organizing his notes, "what you're describing is a complex case of induced incapacity fraud. It's a crime we're seeing more and more frequently, unfortunately. I need you to explain in detail how you uncovered the plan." For the next 2 hours, I reconstructed the entire conspiracy chronologically. I started with the subtle changes in Christine's behavior after her marriage, the gradual appearance of dismissive comments about my mental capacity, and the increasingly insistent pressure to sign legal documents. The decisive moment came on March 15th, I explained, showing the dates on my personal calendar. I found 3 medical evaluations on my desk that I had supposedly authorized. The doctors were Dr. Franklin Reed, a Dr. Michael Santos, and a Dr. Carmen Lopez. The problem was I perfectly remembered never having visited any of these professionals. Detective Mendoza noted the names, as James added relevant medical information. "My father has an excellent memory for medical appointments," my son confirmed. "He's always been very meticulous about his health, especially after my mother's death." I continued explaining how I had decided to discreetly investigate these doctors. Dr. Franklin Reed turned out to have a history of minor ethical violations. Dr. Carmen Lopez had been sanctioned twice for issuing diagnoses without proper examinations. Dr. Michael Santos was the cleanest of the group, but he had received unusual payments from Alan's bank account. "That's when James helped me install the recording app," I went on. "The strategy was simple. Occasionally feign small memory lapses or confusion to encourage Christine and Alan to discuss their plans openly. I played some of the most incriminating recordings for the detective. In one, dated May 3rd, Christine could be heard clearly telling Alan, "Dr. Reed says that with 3 concurring evaluations, we can start the legal process. Once he's declared incompetent, we'll have full power of attorney." In another recording from June 22nd, Alan openly discussed the financial aspects. "With the sale of the Lakeview house, we'll get an immediate $500,000, plus the $220,000 from his savings accounts, and another $220,000 in investments. It'll be enough to cover my debts and have a considerable cushion." Detective Mendoza listened to each recording with an increasingly grave expression. "Mr. Miller, this constitutes clear evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. We also have forgery of medical documents, and now physical assault. The case against both of them is solid." But there was more to reveal. During my discreet investigations, I had discovered that Alan's debts were even more extensive than I had initially imagined. Not only did he owe $220,000 from failed crypto investments, but he had also used my name to apply for bank loans without my knowledge. "How is it possible that he used your name without your authorization?" Mendoza asked. He had access to copies of my ID, I explained. Christine had provided them under the pretext of helping with legal paperwork. He had also forged my signature on at least 3 occasions. James presented additional evidence he had gathered using his medical knowledge. I investigated the doctors involved and discovered a disturbing pattern. Dr. Reed had issued 7 diagnoses of mental incapacity in the last 2 years, all favoring relatives who subsequently gained financial control over the patients. The detective noted this information with particular interest. This suggests a wider network of medical fraud. We'll need to investigate all of these cases. During the questioning, I also revealed details about the psychological pressure I had endured. Christine had started treating me condescendingly in public, suggesting to friends and acquaintances that my judgment was deteriorating. On several occasions, she had corrected my memories in front of others, creating a narrative of mental confusion that was completely false. The psychological manipulation is particularly insidious, I observed. For a while, I even began to question my own perception of reality. When your own daughter constantly tells you you're confused, you start to doubt yourself. Detective Mendoza completed the formal statement and explained the next steps. Alan would remain in custody while the assault and fraud charges were processed. Christine would be summoned for questioning in the coming days, and additional criminal charges could be filed depending on her level of involvement in the fraudulent scheme. "Mr. Miller," he said as I signed the final documents, "I want you to know that cases like this require considerable courage to report. Many victims never find the strength to confront family members who betray them." "Detective," I replied, "I discovered that maintaining one's own dignity is worth more than keeping family peace." Leaving the station, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The legal process was just beginning, but the truth was finally in the hands of the proper authorities. Justice would run its course, and I could start to rebuild my life, far from the toxicity that had poisoned the last few years. The days following the formal complaint were filled with an emotional intensity I hadn't experienced since Isabel's death. The news of Alan's arrest and the criminal investigation spread quickly through our social circle in Chicago. The phones wouldn't stop ringing. Former business partners, neighbors, friends of decades expressing their shock and offering support. On Wednesday morning, 3 days after the disastrous party, I received an unexpected call from Michael Castle, my lawyer for the past 15 years. His voice was tense and worried. "Edward, we need to meet urgently. Additional complications have arisen that we hadn't anticipated." An hour later, in his office on Michigan Avenue, Michael revealed information that amplified the magnitude of the family betrayal. "Alan wasn't just planning your legal incapacitation. He was actively working to destabilize your personal finances. We've discovered unauthorized transfers totaling $40,000, he explained, reviewing detailed bank statements. He used copies of your documents to make moves that technically looked legitimate but were designed to create erratic financial patterns. The strategy was diabolically clever. By creating a history of seemingly confused and irrational transactions, Alan was building additional evidence of my supposed mental decline. Duplicate purchases, transfers to unknown accounts, investments in extremely risky financial products, all designed to support the narrative of an old man losing his cognitive faculties. "But there's more," Michael continued with a grave expression. "We've identified at least 6 properties that Alan tried to use as collateral for loans in your name, Fortunately, the banks required your physical presence to complete the processes, which thwarted his plans. The revelation left me momentarily speechless. This wasn't just an opportunistic scam. It was a sophisticated criminal operation that had been underway for more than a year. That same afternoon, Detective Mendoza contacted me with news about Christine's interrogation. My daughter had been formally summoned and had chosen to appear with her own lawyer, a move that confirmed the seriousness of her legal situation. Your daughter initially denied any knowledge of her husband's fraudulent activities, Mendoza informed me during a phone call. However, when we presented the recordings where she actively participates in the discussions, her defense strategy quickly fell apart. According to the detective, Christine had tried to downplay her involvement, claiming that Alan had manipulated her and that she had simply followed his instructions without fully understanding the legal implications. It was a pathetic defense that didn't hold up against the available evidence. The recordings clearly show she understood perfectly what they were doing, Mendoza continued. On several occasions, she even suggests specific strategies to speed up the incapacitation process. On Thursday morning, I received a completely unexpected visit. Christine arrived at my Lakeview home, accompanied by Patricia, James's wife, who had apparently agreed to mediate in a desperate attempt at family reconciliation. "Edward," Patricia said with obvious discomfort, "Christine wants to talk to you. She is very sorry and believes things can be resolved if you talk calmly." I allowed them in, more out of curiosity than any genuine hope of reconciliation. Christine looked haggard, with deep dark circles under her eyes, and a paleness that revealed the stress of the last few days. But what struck me most was the complete absence of the arrogance she had displayed at the party. "Dad," she began in a trembling voice, "I know I've made terrible mistakes. I know I've hurt you in unforgivable ways. But please, you need to understand that Alan manipulated me. He convinced me that you were really sick, that you needed help you couldn't recognize." I listened without interrupting, watching every gesture, every vocal inflection. It was a convincing performance, but I knew my daughter too well to believe in her supposed remorse. "Alan told me that doctors had confirmed early signs of dementia," she continued, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. "He told me it was my responsibility as a daughter to protect you, even if it meant making tough decisions that you wouldn't understand." "And the $40,000, I asked directly. "Did he also manipulate you into authorizing those transfers?" Her expression changed instantly. The mask of vulnerability cracked, revealing a flash of the calculating coldness I had seen at the party. "I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. I never authorized any transfers." "Christine," I interjected with a calm that surprised me. "Your signature appears on 6 different bank documents authorizing financial movements. The police have handwriting experts analyzing each document." She collapsed onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. Patricia looked at me with an expression that mixed pleading and resignation. It was clear she had begun to understand the true magnitude of the situation. "Please, Dad," Christine mumbled through her sobs, "don't destroy our family over this. We can pay the money back. We can fix everything. Alan can get help. I can change. But please don't send me to jail." "Our family," I repeated with a deep sadness. "Christine, our family died the moment you decided to see me as an obstacle to your financial prosperity instead of as your father." Patricia tried to mediate one more time. "Edward, think about the grandchildren who might come. Think about all the future family celebrations. Do you really want it all to end like this? Patricia, I replied gently but firmly, any grandchildren I have will come through James and you. As for family celebrations, I prefer to be surrounded by people who respect and value me, not those who see me as a walking bank account. Christine stood up abruptly, and for a moment I saw a flash of the rage she had shown at the party. You're selfish. You only think about your wounded pride. You don't care about destroying your own daughter's life. My wounded pride, I repeated slowly, is worth more than your insatiable greed. They left my house that day, and I had a deep sense that it was the last time I would see Christine as anything resembling a daughter. Family ties, once broken by betrayal and greed, can rarely be fully repaired. The criminal investigation would run its course, but my personal decision was final. The legal process unfolded over the next 8 months with a meticulousness that I initially found exhausting but gradually came to appreciate as necessary to achieve full justice. During this period, I made a decision that surprised even James. I put my Lakeview house up for sale and began planning my move to Sarasota, Florida. Are you sure about this, Dad? My son asked during one of our weekly dinners in February 2024. You've lived in that house for 20 years. All your memories with Mom are there. That's precisely why I need to leave, I explained. The beautiful memories with your mother are in here. I touched my chest. Not in the walls of a house, but the painful memories of Christine's betrayal are also soaked into every room. The sale was finalized in March for $510,000, slightly above the appraised value. With that amount, plus my remaining savings after recovering the stolen funds, I would have enough to buy a smaller home in Sarasota and live comfortably for the rest of my days. I chose Sarasota for both practical and emotional reasons. Isabel and I had spent our honeymoon there in 1981 and had always talked about retiring there one day. Plus, the warm climate would be good for my health, and the distance would allow me to start completely fresh. During the moving process, Christine made several desperate attempts to contact me. Handwritten letters arrived weekly, phone calls I didn't answer, and even unannounced appearances at my door that I simply ignored. They all followed the same pattern. Pleas for forgiveness mixed with attempts at emotional manipulation. In one of her longest letters dated April 15th, she wrote, "Dearest Dad, I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, but I also know that deep in your heart you still love me. Alan is no longer part of my life. I've started divorce proceedings. Please give me a chance to prove that I can once again be the daughter I deserve to be." I read it all, but I didn't reply. The words sounded calculated, lacking the authenticity that would have been required to even consider a reconciliation. Besides, my sources had informed me that the divorce was a legal strategy to protect marital assets from the consequences of the criminal trial, not a genuine emotional decision. The climax of the legal process came in May 2024. The prosecutor had built a solid case based on my recordings, the testimony of the party guests, the forensic evidence of the forgeries, and the statements of the corrupt doctors who had collaborated in the scheme. Alan, facing charges of aggravated fraud, forgery, physical assault, and criminal conspiracy, had tried multiple defense strategies. Initially, he claimed I had misinterpreted innocent conversations. When that defense crumbled in the face of the evidence, he tried to place all the blame on Christine, alleging she had been the mastermind behind the plan. His lawyer, an older man named Richard Towers, made a final desperate attempt during closing arguments. Your Honor, my client acknowledges having made serious errors in judgment, but it must be understood that he acted under the influence and manipulation of a woman who intimately knew her father's vulnerabilities. The strategy was disgusting but predictable. Sacrifice Christine to minimize his own sentence. I watched my daughter during this moment, sitting in the defendant's chair, and saw how the betrayal she had committed against me was now being turned against her. Christine's case was legally more complex. Her lawyer, a young but competent woman named Helen Vance, had built a defense based on emotional manipulation and Alan's undue influence. My client was the victim of a calculating man who exploited her financial and emotional vulnerability after years of an abusive marriage. During her personal testimony, Christine tried to present herself as a secondary victim of the situation. I never wanted to hurt my father. Alan convinced me that Dad needed professional medical help, that it was my duty as a daughter to ensure he received the proper care. When the prosecutor showed her the recordings, where she actively discussed the financial aspects of the plan, her composure crumbled. I was confused. Alan told me it was the only way to protect the family's future. Protect the family's future by having your healthy father declared incompetent? The prosecutor asked with evident disbelief. I thought he was really sick, she murmured weakly. Judge Frank Morales, a man of about 60, with a reputation for strict but fair justice, listened to all the testimony with meticulous attention. During the trial, he had asked penetrating questions that revealed his deep understanding of the calculated nature of the crime. When it was my turn to testify, I addressed the court directly with a statement I had carefully prepared. Your Honor, for 42 years I raised a daughter with love, values, and opportunities. I gave her an education, emotional support, and financial security. In return, she conspired to rob me of my autonomy, my dignity, and my assets. I am not seeking revenge. I am seeking justice and protection for other parents who might face similar betrayals. The sentences were announced on June 2nd, 2024. Alan received 3 years of effective prison time for the multiple charges, in addition to the obligation to fully repay the stolen funds, plus interest and damages. Christine was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 200 hours of community service. I watched their reactions as the judge read the sentences. Alan remained stoic, probably relieved not to receive a harsher sentence. Christine cried inconsolably, but her tears no longer elicited any compassion from me. Leaving the courthouse that day, surrounded by the support of James, Patricia, and several loyal friends, I felt a sense of final closure. Justice had prevailed, but more importantly, I had fully reclaimed my personal dignity. Sarasota was waiting for me, and with it, the chance to build a new life based on authentic relationships and mutual respect. My arrival in Sarasota in July 2024 marked the true beginning of my personal rebirth. I had bought a 2-bedroom apartment near St. Armand's Circle, a vibrant area that combined residential tranquility with proximity to downtown. For the first time in years, I woke up each morning without the feeling of walking on eggshells. The initial adjustment was easier than I had anticipated. My new neighbors, especially Amy Roberts, a 71-year-old widow who lived in the apartment next door, welcomed me with a genuine warmth I had forgotten existed. Edward, if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to knock on my door, she had said on the first day with a motherly smile that reminded me of my own mom. During the first few weeks, I established basic routines: shopping at the local market, walks along the Sarasota Bayfront Park, exploring downtown. But it was Amy who suggested the activity that would completely transform my new life. "Have you thought about joining a gym?" she asked during one of our casual encounters in the elevator. "There's one that specializes in seniors nearby. It's called Active Seniors Fitness, and they say it's wonderful." The idea intrigued me immediately. During the months of the legal process, I had neglected my physical fitness, and although my medical exams were still excellent, I felt I needed to rebuild not only my emotional life, but also my physical strength. The gym was located in a converted old industrial warehouse with modern equipment specifically designed for people over 60. The atmosphere was completely different from traditional gyms. Soft music instead of aggressive beats, warm lighting, and an immediate sense of community. The director, Carmen Morales, a 45-year-old physical therapist with contagious energy, greeted me personally. "Mr. Miller, welcome to our family. Here, it's not just about physical exercise, but about holistic well-being. We want you to feel comfortable and motivated." During the initial assessment, Carmen was impressed by my basic physical condition. "For 66, you have an excellent foundation. With the right program, you can achieve levels of strength and endurance you can't even imagine." My first day of training was a revelation. The morning group consisted of about 15 people, men and women between 60 and 75, all with fascinating personal stories and inspiring attitudes. I met Anthony Vegas, a 72-year-old former math professor who had started training after a mild heart attack 3 years ago. "Edward, this place saved my life," he confessed as we did cardiovascular resistance exercises. "Not just physically, but mentally. I found purpose and genuine companionship here." Rose Delgado, a 69-year-old former nurse, quickly became my favorite workout partner. Her personal story resonated with my own experience. She had cut ties with her son after discovering he had been stealing money from her bank account for years. "People think we're too old to start over," Rose told me during an aqua aerobic session, "but I've never felt stronger or more independent than I do now." The social aspect of the gym proved to be as transformative as the physical one. After each session, the group would gather in the attached cafe for breakfast and to share experiences. It was during these conversations that authentic friendships truly blossomed. Mercedes Lopez, a 71-year-old former librarian with an extraordinary sense of humor, organized group activities on weekends: trips to nearby towns, museum visits, community dinners at local restaurants. "Edward, retirement doesn't mean retiring from life," she often told me. "It means finally living the life you consciously choose." After 3 months of regular training, the changes were dramatic. I had lost 15 pounds, gained considerable muscle mass, and was experiencing energy levels I hadn't felt in decades. But more importantly, I had developed a network of friendships based on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine emotional support. During this period, I received regular calls from James, who watched my transformation with joy and some surprise. "Dad, you sound completely different. Your voice has a vitality I haven't heard in years." "I feel like I'm living my real life for the first time in decades," I confessed during one of our Sunday phone calls. "I'm surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I have." In October, Carmen Morales suggested I participate in a regional senior fitness competition to be held in November. The idea intimidated me at first, but the enthusiastic support of my gym mates convinced me to accept the challenge. "Edward, you've made extraordinary progress," Carmen encouraged me during a personal training session. "I think you might surprise yourself with what you're capable of." The preparation for the competition became a community project. Anthony helped me with nutritional planning, Rose joined me for extra cardio sessions, and Mercedes organized a support group that attended all my intensive training sessions. During these weeks of intense preparation, I often reflected on the contrast between my past and present life. In Chicago, I had been surrounded by people who saw me as a resource to be exploited. In Sarasota, I was surrounded by people who celebrated me as an individual and a friend. The night before the competition, while having dinner with my gym group at a restaurant downtown, Mercedes raised her glass of wine for an impromptu toast. "To Edward, who has shown us that true strength comes not from family blood, but from the relationships we build with love and respect." That night I slept soundly, feeling an inner peace I hadn't experienced since before Isabel's death. I had found not only a new city to live in, but a new way of existing based on authenticity and continuous personal growth. The competition would simply be the external celebration of an internal transformation that was already complete. The regional senior fitness competition was held at the Sarasota Sports Complex on a bright Saturday in November. Waking up that morning, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the man looking back at me. Where there was once a tired and betrayed businessman, I now saw someone vital, muscular, and brimming with genuine confidence. My gym mates were waiting for me at the entrance of the complex, holding homemade signs that read, "Go Edward," and "Active Seniors Fitness." Carmen Morales looked more nervous than I did, constantly checking my registration documents and reviewing the exercises we had practiced for months. "Remember," she whispered before I headed to the warm-up area, "no matter the result, you've already won just by getting here." But I knew it did matter. Not out of competitive vanity, but because it represented the symbolic culmination of my personal rebirth. Every rep, every set, every drop of sweat during these months had been a declaration of independence against those who had tried to reduce me to a vulnerable and incapable old man. The men's 65-70 age category included 23 participants from all over the region. I discreetly observed my competitors during the warm-up, men who had clearly dedicated years to maintaining their physical fitness, some with bodies that defied any stereotype about aging. The events included an adapted bench press, bodyweight squats, modified push-ups, and a cardiovascular endurance circuit. Each exercise was specifically designed to assess real physical functionality in older adults, not just brute force. During the first bench press event, I managed to lift 100 pounds for 12 repetitions, a result that exceeded my own expectations. The audience, mostly family and friends of the competitors, applauded enthusiastically. From the stands, I heard the unmistakable voices of Rose, Anthony, and Mercedes shouting my name with athletic fervor. The squats were my strength. Months of specific training with Carmen had perfected my technique to a fluidity that impressed even the judges. I completed 75 repetitions without a break, temporarily placing me second in the overall standings. During a break between events, I received an unexpected phone call that I initially considered ignoring. It was James, calling from Chicago, with news he preferred to tell me personally rather than wait for our usual weekly chat. "Dad, I didn't want to interrupt your competition, but I thought you should know right away," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Patricia is pregnant. You're going to be a grandfather in June." The news hit me like a wave of pure joy that spread throughout my entire being. Throughout the painful process with Christine, I had contemplated the possibility of never experiencing the joy of meeting grandchildren. Now, as I prepared for the next physical test, I was also mentally preparing for the role of a grandfather I had always wanted. The modified push-ups were technically perfect. The muscle I had built over the months allowed me to perform 50 repetitions with impeccable form that contrasted dramatically with some younger but less prepared competitors. The final cardiovascular circuit required completing 6 different stations in the shortest possible time: stationary bike, treadmill, rowing machine, steps, elliptical, and an agility test with cones. This was where mental endurance became as important as physical. As I navigated each station, my mind wandered to the extraordinary contrasts of the last 18 months. In September 2023, I was being manipulated by my own daughter toward a future of forced dependency and loss of autonomy. Now, in November 2024, I was competing athletically against men a decade younger. I completed the circuit in 8 minutes and 43 seconds, a time that definitively placed me among the top 5 competitors in my category. Physical exhaustion mixed with a euphoria I hadn't felt since my days as a successful entrepreneur. But this time, the satisfaction came from purely personal achievements. During the award ceremony, I placed 4th overall, a result that far exceeded any realistic expectations I had when I started my training. But as I received my participation medal, I understood that the real prize had been the transformative process itself. My gym mates greeted me like a conquering hero. Carmen cried openly with pride. Rose hugged me with maternal strength. And Anthony declared that tonight we would celebrate with the best dinner Sarasota could offer. During the celebration at O'Leary's Tiki Bar and Grill, a traditional spot near the bay, I reflected on the extraordinary journey I had experienced. Mercedes, acting as an impromptu master of ceremonies, called for silence to say a few words. "Edward has taught us something fundamental," she declared, raising her glass of sparkling wine. "That life truly begins when we decide to live authentically, surrounded by people who value us and challenge us to be better versions of ourselves." That night, returning to my apartment, I sat on the balcony overlooking the lights of the city I now considered my true home. The phone rang again. It was James, eager to hear details of the competition and share more news about